Hey y'all, I'm James Wright and welcome to my shop. And today I want to talk about woodworking with all 5 senses. You have 5 senses, but sometimes we kind of neglect some of them. But if you actually start thinking about the woodworking you're doing and think about all of your senses, there are a lot of things you can learn. When you first pick up a board, you have the sense of touch. And you can feel how heavy is it. Is it a heavy board? Is it a light board? That can tell you is it a softer wood or a harder wood. You can try to put your fingernail into it, and that can also tell you if it's a hard wood or a soft wood. In some instances, you can actually feel the grain and feel if you're going with or against the grain. When using a plane and you're running down the board, sometimes you can just feel when something's not right. There's a little bit of a vibration in the plane, and getting that tactile feedback can be amazingly helpful to tell you when you're doing something wrong or when you're doing something right. When I want to know how sharp an edge is, I feel it. Honestly, you can just feel the ridges on your finger and it automatically will tell you, is it sharp or dull? Now you have to be careful with it. As with anything in the shop, you're working with sharp tools. But honestly, feeling the edge is one of the easiest ways to just know, yeah, I probably should go sharpen this. It's the same with saws. Sometimes you're wondering, is it dull? And if you feel the teeth back here or up here at the front, you don't use those few teeth all the time. And you can compare them to the ones in the middle. If these ones don't feel quite as sharp as these, then it might be time to sharpen it. When you want 2 things to be the exact same thickness or you're getting a joint matched up, sometimes putting them together and just sliding your finger across the 2 and saying, do I feel a difference between the 2 can make a huge difference. So usually when we think about using your senses when it comes to woodworking, we think about that sense of touch. It's probably the most obvious because it's the physical one. You're using a hand tool, you're gonna feel it in your hand, and that tactile touch, it's just, it's pleasant. And when you get a surface that's nice and smooth, it just feels good. And that feeling is just part and parcel with all of woodworking. But touch isn't the only sense. We've got 4 more. I see you. If you ask most people, it's not the first sense that immediately comes to mind, but it's probably the most important one. It's the one that allows you to do everything else. And honestly, I could probably do woodworking without the other senses, but if I lost my sense of sight, I would have problems. Now that being said, Stanley actually used to make a whole set of rulers and measuring devices for the blind, and they actually had braille on them so you could know where you were on the ruler. It was really kind of interesting. And yes, you can do woodworking without sight, but it's one of those fundamental things that I couldn't imagine doing it. A trained eye can see the imperfections in the wood. You can see the direction that the grain runs. You can eyeball down the edge of a board to see if it's straight. In most instances, if your eye can't see a problem, then there really is no problem, because if you as the trained woodworker can't see the problem, then the Joe Schmo who's going to be using the furniture could never see the problem. If it looks straight, then it is straight. Or so the saying goes. I have several fancy straight edges, but most of the time, the eyeball is plenty good enough. I don't need to stretch for the perfection of a perfectly ground surface. So the sense of sight is, well, pretty obvious, but what about the other 3? Hear no evil. The sense of hearing is one that most people do not use to its fullest potential. But you'll notice the more that you're in a shop, the more you'll hear small differences that just let you know, dude, something ain't right. When I was supervisor of a machine shop, I would be working in my office and I would hear a machine that I knew really well, and I would just suddenly hear a tone that would slightly change. And I would immediately jump out of my office and run in there like, stop, there's something going wrong here. And it just those little things you can pick up if you get used to the tools and understand what is it supposed to sound like. A sharp plane has a bit of a zippy tone to it. A dull plane has a bit of a scratchy sound to it. When you're using a saw, sometimes you'll hear a bit of the wobble in it, or you hear just a vibration, and that lets you know, hey, your arm is out of alignment. Fix your arm. When you're using a chisel and a mallet and you're chopping in a mortise and you're pounding away and you hear tap, 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 plonk, that lets you know, hey, you got to the bottom. It's not going to go any farther. If you're ever using a file on metal, sometimes it'll feel like it's sliding across the top and you'll hear more of a zingy sound to it. And that means the metal you're working on is too hard and this is just skating across the top. Some tools have very specific sounds to that particular tool, and you have to get to know your particular tool. But you'll notice that every tool in the shop has a sound, and it's one of those things you just have to get to know. You have to know your tools, and what do they sound like when they're working properly, and what do different sounds mean you need to fix. Often the sound of a tool is the very first symptom that something's wrong. You need to make adjustments, and if something isn't sounding right, stop what you're doing, fix it. Well, that's 3, but what about the other 2? You know, and those ones, what do those do? When it comes to taste, there are very few things in the shop that I really want to put in my mouth. Most things in here I can do without. On the rare occasion that I do actually taste something, it's usually a mistake, but it often gives me the very same feedback I get when I smell the thing, because taste and smell are often the same sense, just 2 different directions getting to the same nerve. So let's go ahead and lump these 2 into one. I remember talking about the sense of smell with someone else, and they're like, well, yeah, there's no way you could smell problems in the shop. There's just things that don't pop up. But honestly, the sense of smell is a really important one that I use every single day I'm in the shop. It's probably the one closest associated to my emotions. And when I'm feeling down and I want to be encouraged, sometimes I'll come down to the shop and smell things that just make me feel good. There's something fun about walking into someone else's wood shop and smelling the smell and realizing, this feels like home. Like homemade boiled linseed oil. Just the smell is so fantastic. Every finish, glue, adhesive, any liquid in the shop, they all have a specific smell. And sometimes they can tell you, hey, don't use that glue. It's gone bad. Other times you open up a jar of Rubio Monocoat and it's just like, oh yes, I love this. I want to use it more. And they add to the enjoyment of the process. Other times though, it's, is something burning? 3 times now I've had oiled rags catch on fire. Now, twice of them it was on purpose for demonstration's sake, and once though, it wasn't. Thankfully, my first indication that something was going wrong is I smelled it. When working with power tools, you can often tell if a blade is dull by the smell. You can often tell if it needs to be cleaned by the smell. You can tell if the tool is running well by the smell. And it's one of those senses that you just gotta experience the things in the shop. And most of the time, it's an emotional thing, and you just get to enjoy the different things. And when you walk in and you play with different woods and different senses, it feels good. And other times, something's off. And that sense of smell just lets you know that I should probably be looking around at what's going on here. But have you ever wondered why rosewood is called rosewood? I mean, it doesn't look very rosy. It's a very dark wood. It's actually called that because when you cut it, it smells like roses. It smells just like roses. If you've ever worked with fresh cut elm, it smells just like an outhouse. White oak smells just like heaven. Red oak, on the other hand, doesn't. It reminds me of the episode from Home Improvement where Tim challenges Al to a smelling contest. Can you identify the woods by the smell? And a lot of them, especially if they're freshly cut, yeah. If they've been sitting around for a while, a lot of them lose their smell though. Your senses are incredibly important to your time in the shop, and if you can spend the time to develop them and realize what you're smelling, what you're feeling, what you're seeing, what you're hearing, you'll realize that you can become a much better woodworker just by engaging with those senses that you naturally just send to the back part of your brain and don't quite think about. So I'd encourage you, next time you're in the shop, using a tool, whether it be a power tool or a hand tool, take a moment to think about what you are actually sensing. Think about the smells, think about the feelings, and think about what are those actually telling you? What are these vibrations I'm feeling? And how can I use that sense to adjust what I'm doing to become a better woodworker? This is actually a topic that's been on my video list for a long time, and I've had several people asking me to do something similar to it. So if you have something like this you would like me to do in the future, let me know that down in the comments down below. If you have any questions, thoughts, ideas, throw those down there. It does actually help out the channel. Anytime you comment down there, or you hit some of those buttons and like and share and subscribe, and thank you. It really means a lot. But if you really want to be amazing and go even farther and really help out this channel, think about joining these people over here. Those are some of the fantastic, wonderful, benevolent, gorgeous people over on patreon.com. And without patrons, I wouldn't be here. You guys are the ones that make this channel happen. Without you, we wouldn't be here. So thank you for that. I think that'll do it for now. And until next time, have a wonderful day. I think I need to challenge Rex to a lick-off. So what exactly do my senses tell me about this?